In a crowded courthouse hallway, a deputy thought he was above the law until he grabbed the wrong woman. What he didn't know was that she wasn't just any bystander. She was a sitting federal judge. What followed wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. This is the true story of power abused, justice delivered, and the moment one woman changed everything. Deputy Travis Maddox moved through the courthouse like he owned it, his badge clipped high, his stride just short of a swagger. Everyone knew his reputation loud, confrontational, unchecked. He liked it that way. Power wasn't something he used quietly. It was something he wore like a weapon. He had a pattern. He spoke over public defenders, glared down defendants, and used his authority like a blunt instrument, especially with black women. In his eyes, they were easy targets. No names, no connections, no consequence. So when he saw her standing alone in the corridor near the elevators, he thought nothing of blocking her path. Camille Rivers wasn't in robes that day. No entourage, no grand entrance, just her and a simple black suit. Walking toward the elevator with a file under her arm, her presence was quiet, graceful, and precise, like someone who had nothing to prove. Travis stepped in front of her, crowding the hallway. "Going somewhere in a hurry?" he asked, his voice laced with condescension. Camille didn't blink. "Excuse me," she said firmly, looking him in the eye. "Please step aside." He didn't move. His smirk deepened. "Say it nicer." There was no one else close enough to intervene, only the soft shuffle of lawyers and clerks passing through like traffic. The moment felt small, but it wasn't. Camille could feel it, a choice being forced upon her. Step back, or hold your ground. She stepped forward. They brushed shoulders barely. It was the kind of incidental contact that happens every hour in any courthouse hallway. But to Maddox, it was enough. He grabbed her arm with sudden force, yanking her sideways with a grip that made her breath catch. And then, the hallway wasn't quiet anymore. "That's Judge Rivers," a voice shouted. "You just put your hands on a federal judge." Everything stopped. The heat drained from Maddox's face as he slowly let go. The smirk vanished. People turned. A few pulled out phones. One young deputy, standing near the wall, stepped forward in disbelief. Camille adjusted her sleeve, straightened her posture, and turned toward the stunned crowd. "I want him arrested," she said calmly. "Right now." The young deputy hesitated. Maddox was his senior, his mentor. But then he looked at Camille's face, steady, unshaken, and the truth settled in. Without another word, he stepped toward Maddox and pulled out his handcuffs. "What the hell are you doing?" Maddox hissed, voice low and furious. "Following the law," the deputy replied. "Put your hands behind your back." It took less than a minute, but it broke the myth that Maddox was untouchable. Camille didn't flinch as he was cuffed and led away. But inside, a storm raged, not from fear, but from the knowledge of how close this had come to being another buried incident. If she weren't a judge, would anyone have believed her? She sat in a small office moments later, surrounded by officers, filing a report with quiet precision. The bruise on her arm was already blooming purple. It wasn't the first time she'd seen abuse of power, but it was the first time she'd worn the bruise herself. She didn't stop at the report. By sunset, Camille had already contacted federal prosecutors and civil rights attorneys. She personally ordered the courthouse surveillance footage to be secured. She gathered the names of every witness in the hallway, and then she started digging. It didn't take long to find the truth hiding in plain sight. There were complaints against Maddox, 5. To be exact, 3 filed by black women, all describing verbal intimidation and unwanted physical contact. One from a public defender who had accused him of fabricating evidence. Another from a teenage girl arrested in a park who said Maddox had screamed in her face until she cried. All quietly closed. No disciplinary action, just silence. Camille knew what needed to happen next. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. Within days, federal charges were filed: obstruction of justice, civil rights violations under color of law, and assault on a federal officer. Maddox was suspended without pay. Internal Affairs reopened every complaint, with fresh eyes and a new urgency. But this wasn't just about the law. This was about what kind of system let him get this far, about the whispers in the halls, the glances people exchanged when Maddox walked past, about the culture that taught him he could get away with it. And then came the trial. The courtroom was packed. Officers in the back, reporters in the hall. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a reckoning. Camille took the stand, not just as a judge, but as a citizen. She spoke with clarity, never once raising her voice. She described what it felt like to be treated as less than human in a building dedicated to justice, to have her title mean nothing when her skin and gender made her a target. Maddox's defense tried to paint her as overly sensitive, claimed she escalated, tried to minimize the force he used. But the surveillance footage didn't lie. Neither did the other witnesses. In the end, the jury didn't deliberate long. The verdict was read aloud, guilty on all counts. Sentencing followed. 5 years in federal prison, no parole, a mandatory forfeiture of his badge and pension. But more than that, Maddox lost the one thing he valued above all else, fear-based power. Camille watched him led away in shackles, eyes downcast, reputation in ruins. It didn't bring her joy, but it brought clarity. What happened to her wasn't rare. What was rare was the outcome. That night, she received an envelope on her desk, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you for standing up, for all of us who couldn't." Camille folded the note and placed it in her drawer, right beside her gavel. She knew her work wasn't over. She knew there were more Maddoxes. But she also knew the silence was broken now. People had seen what happens when power is abused, and what happens when someone stands tall enough to face it down. She walked out of this courthouse the next day, arms still sore, but steps steady. The world outside hadn't changed much, but inside those walls, something had shifted, and it wouldn't shift back.